We're laughing here. Welcome. Back for another installment of our cyber threat workshop with RiskIQ. Also, making news this summer, RiskIQ was acquired by Microsoft. So we're repping a little bit today. And also, one of the big things that we have going on, Benjamin and Jackie, is that we have some folks from Microsoft here to talk about the integration of threat intelligence with the whole concept of extended detection and response, or XDR. And so we're going to get into some of those use cases and in the lab and everything. Remember, lawyers rule the world, so be careful when we're clicking, everyone here. But we're going to give it a couple of minutes, and then we're going to get into the material. Lots to cover today, because we had kind of both those sides of intelligence of the internet, what's going on with adversaries and their infrastructure, and then, in response to that, how can we safeguard the enterprise with an extended response and extended detection in order to discover these things faster and mitigate them more promptly? Because let's face it, there's a lot of bad out there. And so we'll just give it a couple more minutes and folks can start piling in. But Benjamin, you had fun with this one.
Yes, it was interesting to put all this stuff together and weave the integrated use case. So that's something it's always nice to merge the inside and the outside together.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish I had this 20 years ago. This is like the things that we've dreamt about.
Yeah, things we dreamt about when we're getting onto the internet and it was like ding dong, back in the day. I agree with you. There are things like XDR and capabilities that can happen with the orchestration where you can really make use of the intelligence you find. Additionally, I told you I've been reading Alison Perloff's book. They tell me this is how the world ends. It's a whole history of her career covering cybersecurity.
Holy heck. We're going deep this morning.
Holy heck. I mean, I live in this world, and we'll go through backgrounds, but I kind of come from the academic and research side in the first place. Holy moly. The amount of things that, never really come to the surface that we learn about. She's able to get these people on deep background as sources and so forth from the NSA and GCHQ and Great Britain. It's uncanny how much effort there is out there to wreak havoc. And so we're going to find some of those things today and shield ourselves against them. So Benjamin, you want to lead us off and kind of start with intros here?
Sure. So I'm Benjamin Powell. I'm now the Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Microsoft. My background, practitioner for half of my career and the other half working at startups. So I've worked in state and local government, worked for the Port of San Diego, so they also did the airport. I worked at UCSD, biotech, where we did manufacturing, financial services, software development. And one of my fun facts is I enjoy spearfishing. And so you can probably see in the background some of my spear guns hanging up on the wall. They're not power washer attachments, but I actually go swim in the ocean and catch a fish. And this was the last fish I caught 2 months ago off of Windansea Beach in La Jolla. So that's my fun fact. So please take my emails. Don't ignore them. I'm not trying to steal your credentials. I just catch fish.
True story. And now what kind of fish is that?
That's a halibut.
It's a halibut. And what's its weightage in
pounds? It was probably, that one was probably 17, 18 pounds.
Okay. It's hefty. Hey, everybody, I'm not like Benjamin, but I'm also very similar. We work together on a day in and day out basis. My background's a little bit more academic, as I mentioned earlier. So my research has been, I was a practitioner years ago. I'm aging myself now, probably 20 years ago now. But most of my opportunity has been in studying the attacker behavior and motivations, primarily the economics of cybercrime. and trying to delve into that and understand what's really driving it, certain factors. It's not always geopolitical. It's not always to simply disrupt or be retaliatory or hacktivism either. Many times it's got about plain dollars and cents that can drive it. And so happy to be here and get into some of the material.
And Josh, you were missed last week. We had a couple people actually asking, "Where's Josh? Where's his hair?"
Hair jokes. Everybody's got the hair jokes.
It's great. And I'm Jackie Kelly. I've been in cybersecurity for 2 years and 17 years in marketing. Worked for the Kansas City Chiefs in broadcasting and Coca-Cola for 6 years, couple companies you might recognize. Also, you might recognize my voice. I do voiceovers, not only for our RiskIQ videos, but also for some national commercials. And I sang the Star Spangled Banner for the Super Bowl parade that was won by us a couple years ago. And of course, my favorite beverage is Diet Coke. And before I pass it over, we have a special guest this week. Tim? Yes? Would you like to introduce yourself, Tim?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. My name is Tim Wolford, and I am a product marketing manager at Microsoft. So I look after Microsoft 365 Defender and that component of our XDR and SIM and XDR stories. So have been really enjoying getting to know the RiskIQ team over the last little while and sort of starting to plug our products together. Benjamin and I have been spending long hours in the depths of product technical stuff, which has been really interesting. And we're really excited to share some of that with you today. And my background is a little weird. I guess I've spent 8 years in and around Microsoft in various roles through AI, IoT, and security. And before that, spent about a decade in financial services. So kind of a roundabout way of getting to tech, but there you go. Yeah, I guess fun fact for me, I also like Diet Coke, but if I had to choose, I would definitely pick champagne. And I try to ski and bike most mornings and dance most evenings. So I do a lot of competitive smooth and Latin ballroom dance. So that's your fun fact about me.
Nice.
We're gonna have a dance off. We're gonna have a dance off later when we can all get together from after this.
Right.
Just bring the champagne, please.
Dance off with some champagne. The other thing too is that you may notice this, folks, but Tim is also John Oliver's better looking brother. You know, in that picture. Yes, thank you for being here. We have gifts. So later today, someone will get a gift card from Amazon. We can move on from that. Okay. Everybody can get the inside joke there. But we do want to get a feel of the room. Once upon a time, in a galaxy very close by, we did these workshops in a physical setting. So we'd be in a big conference room or an auditorium. Sometimes, you know, tailgating, you never know when it might pop up. So we could just say, hey, show of hands, who does this and this and this, that kind of thing. That's all it really is. It's not necessarily trying to get into your brain space or anything, but more than anything, trying to understand what it is you do, what your experience has been like, so that we can tailor things and guide it the way it's most relevant and most specific to you. So first one is just, what's your experience with threat intelligence? So there are some folks out there brand new to the space, some that have been around, wily old veterans of 5+ years. That's your Benjamins of the world. People like me, basically nerds. So, hey, I'm a nerd. You can say that. But just it's a safe place, just letting us know where you are in your experience. That way we can just guide things according to what the audience looks like.
Let's see the results.
So we have, 40% less than 2 years, 22% 2 to 5 years, more than 5 years, 24%, and 15% never.
Okay. And then the other one too is, for those of you that do use threat intelligence, trying to see how you're leveraging it. So my organization leverages threat intelligence in these ways. And it can be multiple, but kind of your primary place that you use it. And we'll just give that a second. Mine, I'm always very biased towards the people using the last one, the counterattack and takedown, because that was my cup of tea back in the day when doing crypto exchange hacks and all this fun stuff. But we'll give it a second longer and go. What are the results here?
42% instant response, 17% vuln management, 23% SecOps, 7% third-party risk and management, and 12% counter attack and takedown.
Hey, there's my 12%. But yeah, not uncommon that IR is a common response there. And yeah, again, we have the XDR aficionado here with Tim. And so probably some very relevant things to talk about there. And then finally, just real quick, we may ask you this again in the future, just a couple of other things later on. But the last one is the kinds of threats you care about. So my organization is most concerned with these threats. And on this one, pick as many as you like. And so because we care about a lot of them. So some may say, all, maybe we should have that kind of a select all of the above. But all these various kinds of threats from your nation states to your run-of-the-mill espionage, ransomware, activists, brand, and so forth. What's interesting, Tim, you'll like to know this, is that I guess it really started the trend, Benjamin, what you think around April, May timeframe, where ransomware was the top answer, and it stayed there every single time. Right. Every workshop, ransomware was the top one. So we might see it
last week as well. Yep. 92%.
Winner chicken dinner.
Yeah, ransomware again is the winner, followed by brand abuse and reputation, then insider threats, nation states, and then we have domestic cybercrime, hacktivism, and espionage.
Okay.
Joshua, if I can add a little piece of verbatim there. We have a feature called threat analytics within XDR that I'll show you later. And the report in there on ransomware was viewed 300 times more than any other report we've ever published. So just furthermore to your point, it's very, very top of mind for a lot of people.
Yeah. Go ahead, Benjamin. Sorry.
Yeah, it's really funny with the vulnerabilities being released and the attacks, the pray and spray type of attacks that are out there. You only need that one little piece to get in to affect you or your supply chain. That's the big thing, is that, because we went all digital because of COVID, that's the biggest threat, is that, your supply chain goes down. That affects you. You can't do business. That's the hard part.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is about ransomware is, of course, you can spray and pray and spray, whatever that is. You can do the indiscriminate opportunism to launch it out there, and you can even wormify it and let it sneak through other things, because wherever it lands, chances are that individual is going to be more willing to pay some money because they're going to care about their data more than you as the adversary do. And so you don't need to be as targeted when it comes to a ransomware attack, because you can still get something out of it. And again, that was this is back in the day when we first started seeing ransomware appear in 2013, 2014, was when, like I said, I was doing this sort of the economics of cybercrime, and ransomware and cryptocurrency sort of collided at that same time to give oxygen to that tactic. So thanks for answering those questions, folks. I promise we're not going to bombard you with a whole lot more. But I just wanted to cover that, just to, again, get a lay of the land of what people are going to care about today. Also with us is Or Schwartz. He's off camera because he's a secret agent, but kind of is. Or is a very well decorated and established security figure from RiskIQ, now Microsoft. And Or is actually helping us out and assisting as well.
There I am.
Okay.
Hey, one thing I just need to mention is that Tim lost power at his house. So there's a windstorm happening. So if you can, Jackie on Teams, send him a message. His generator will be kicking on in a minute or two.
Absolutely.
Oh goodness, I'm so sorry to hear that. I hope
And,
you're right.
I wanted to mention this is live, and I want to make sure we are checking the chat, and or that's part of what you'll be looking at. But feel free to send us a chat during this presentation, ask us to slow down, to stop, ask any questions. Maybe we need to go over something again, raise your hand. I just wanted to go over a couple of those housekeeping things before you get to the next slide.
And thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I'm gonna check on Tim.
Yeah, now I need to go and make sure Tim's okay. I really hope that everything's all right. Windstorms are no joke. Wind is interesting because, like, if it's raining, you can get an umbrella and some rain boots. If it's snowing, you can put on jackets. There's nothing you can do about wind. I mean, it's gonna blow, and that's, you just gotta hope things don't go wrong. Sorry, I'm in Austin, Texas, and we have these windstorms that go in cyclones called tornadoes, and it's frightening. Yeah. But anyway, back to what we were talking about here. So on the two sides of RiskIQ, there is threat intelligence and there's attack surface management. Today, we're going to be talking a lot about the threat intelligence side, which consists of RiskIQ, Illuminate, Passive Total. Now, what's in the goodie bag? Next slide will show exactly the kinds of data sets that we're going to be going through in the Illuminate platform. And so over there on the far right, you can see sort of.
I'm sorry that I changed the theme this morning and it changed the slide. So okay. I will change it before we send it out to everybody.
No worries. We'll send that out to everybody so you can get, but just, use your imagination. The various data sets that we'll be going through, and then doing some pivoting fun where we can trip through the various data sets and pivot upon different points to identify and ultimately mitigate the threats that we find. If you go to the next one real quick, Benjamin. So we're gonna get you in there now. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we have a lab. So what we're going to do in a second is I'm going to get the username and password into the chat so you can log in. So give me a quick second. I need to fire up something on my machine. I forgot to do it this morning. And
yes, folks, we're going a bit earlier today than usual.
Yes.
So it's right now 7:17 Pacific time, where Benjamin is in San Diego.
My brain is still asleep. I had my coffee, but it's still it's not there just yet.
Yeah, so we'll get the lab set up, and so you'll be able to use those credentials, get into the lab environment. One thing to note is that at the end of the workshop today, the lab will be burned down. So, but there is an option at the end to where you can extend it with a trial. Which is actually more effective anyway, because the trial actually shows you your own attack surface instead of the contrived one that we're going to give you today in the lab. So then you can actually look at the stuff in your own world. And how long does the trial go, Benjamin? It's like 30. It's 30 days,
30
right?
days.
30 days. So for 30 days, you can play around with it and do the exercises again. Share it with a friend who doesn't need a friend. And so we'll get moving there. The links have been posted.
Yes.
Right. All right. So while you're all logging in, you can also the tools.
So today we use tools sometimes that are not in our product. They're other open source types of tools. So we'll be using RiskIQ Illuminate, and I'll also be showing you maybe some screenshots and URL scan.io of websites that we're investigating. And then at the very bottom, there's a Jupyter notebook that you can download and run. So I'm going to demonstrate a Jupyter notebook looking at vulnerabilities to see if you have it or any of your third parties have it. And this is a quick and easy way to run it and find out within a minute all of the vulnerabilities that match certain CVEs, to see if there's any insights that RiskIQ has developed for those that might be a deeper investigation or analysis of that type of threat using other indicators. And then it will also tell you where that breakdown is in hosts and IPs.
All right. Now, as we say each time, lawyers rule the world. So the gist of it is we believe that you are more than capable as a security professional to use your best judgment. But lawyers rule the world. So forgive me. Here is the disclaimer. RiskIQ's cyber threat workshops include live, real-time observations and threat indicators, including malicious infrastructure and adversary threat tooling. RiskIQ will share online resources, such as IP addresses, domain names, etc., that should be considered real threats posing a clear and present danger. We ask our participants to use their best judgment and minimize unnecessary risk while interacting with malicious systems in workshop lab exercises. Now we got that out of the way, we can actually get into the fun.
Hey, quick question. So Tim just sent me a message. He can be on the campus in 40 minutes to be able to do this for sure, or he can dial in, but he won't be able to show anything. So should we let him go to the campus and then we cover other things and have him?
Tell him to go to campus.
Okay.
Be careful in the wind.
Okay.
I hope he's not putting himself in danger to do that. But since he offered, I'm guessing that.
Okay, so I said go to campus.
This is live, folks. You're seeing how the sausage gets made. Or, the salad. We can chop up the lettuce, and then you got to use arugula. You need arugula on that salad. Roma tomatoes. Got to use the Roma tomatoes. Anyway, there's your disclaimer. Tim's going to run to the office in Redmond to be able to demonstrate the fun jazz we have on the XDR side. However, when we get into the intelligence side, the threat intelligence side, which is the first part of this narrative, there are some real challenges. We all face them. I know I have personally. And so, Benjamin, if you want to go to the next one, they really consist of things that are outside of our control, the circumstances that happen around us. Okay, so first, digital went off and ate the world, and everything got turned into bits and bytes. The physical stuff that used to make up our world is now ones and zeros, a bunch of digits. And as such, it creates a lot of irregularity. So you have lots of targets, they're all irregular, and it keeps growing in convoluted ways. So it's not even like a linear progression where you can see this expanse moving out in front of you. It's up, down, left, right, and it's 4-dimensional. There's time involved too. So there's a depth to it, a width, a height, and time. And those 4 different dimensions create a lot of havoc when it comes to trying to understand what's what and who's who in the zoo of the internet. The second one is not very insightful most of the time. Threat intelligence, though very good, think about OSINT, for example. Let's just say you have a trove of 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 OSINT articles. How many matter to you? 5%? 10%? That's probably generous. How many are relevant to you today? Again, some may have been relevant to you a week ago. Some may be relevant to you in the future. But today, what actually matters? That's what's difficult, because they're not really based on here and now observations. And so it can be difficult to get a real understanding of the context that you're dealing with right now. And what are we doing? The majority of people here use TI for what? For incident response. Well, that's a right here, right now situation. But because it's generic, partial, and not really time sensitive or contextual to my attack surface, sometimes it just doesn't give me the right prioritization. And then next, another challenge is even when it has the right context, and even when it makes sense of the digital bit sphere, I still have to get some precise action out of it and get something meaningful in my outcome. But that can be difficult to get as well, because sometimes the intelligence is inapplicable to the enforcements that I have. It doesn't have a proper workflow or process that can be easily consumed and pushed over into an appropriate response. And finally, then the challenge comes to, I have all this intelligence, think about the internet, right? All of human knowledge in the history of forever that still can't get me the outcome I want, which is ultimately global defense that scales. Because if you live on the internet, you're a global citizen, you're a global participant when it comes to information security. Because if it touches the internet, it's everywhere. And so that can be difficult to get visibility, to get real insights, to get an actual outcome you want, and for it to lead to defense at global scale. So those are the challenges kind of at a high level. So what we do at RiskIQ is sort of twofold. You are familiar with endpoints. So let me just draw a metaphor for you. This is a ball, and this ball represents an attack surface. On the left side, you have your device world. Something bad happens on a device. We run analysis on it, like your EPP, like Defender, and those other ones. And then we ultimately push out the appropriate insight and the appropriate enforcement to mitigate that threat. So it's, again, a one-time occurrence that can then be applied to all. In the same way, there's another side of this ball, which is our digital side. So something happens out there on the internet around our digital footprint, our digital presence, or something that matters to us in the digital space, like a third party, for example. Run the same sort of analysis, understand the relatedness, apply the insight, but now the apply to all is the internet itself. So what that benefits you with is, because even though things are digital and constantly fluid, you have the ability to have some sort of adaptive defense, both on yourself, being able to map and monitor the defenses you need to appropriate to yourself, but also being able to see the indicators of the adversary fingerprints as those shift and move around too. And so as things move around, defenses can move and adjust with them. And so that's the real kind of, this is the ball analogy of what we have on our device side and what we do on the digital side. Moving along, we do that because things are so fluid and so dynamic. And again, this is just, from the marketing people to kind of give you a nice little graphic of it. But that wavy motion is very irregular and chaotic. If you go to the next one, Benjamin, I know this is one of the things that was near and dear to you. So you want to take this?
Yeah. So like the trends that we're seeing in the marketplace is that everything is going remote. It's hybrid. It's transforming. There's geopolitical fracturing, and you need to make sure that operationally you're resilient, that things are online, and you need to be able to live in the zero trust world where you want to trust but verify everything. So the implications that you're seeing is that you're trying to understand your attack surface and your data, understand where your problems might be, and understand the costs that are that happen because you're on this ever-changing hybrid environment where part of it's internal, part of it's outside in the cloud, and you might be in multiple clouds. So that's kind of thing that we're trying to make sure that we're able to help you in that analysis, not only with understanding with the security aspect, but where everything is located as well.
Yeah. And like we were mentioning earlier, making sure that things are relevant, there's this concept of external attack surface management and, of course, threat intelligence. And the two really play off each other, both by having a view of yourself, that's your own digital footprint, and a view of the adversary and those threats. And so when you combine those two things together, you get that, I'm not going to be all corporate-y and say synergy. What you do is you actually get both sides of the puzzle.
Right.
You and others, good and bad, adversary and ally. And being able to see both of those things, because we all participate in this grand thing called the internet, same way we all breathe oxygen. And since that's the case, and we all share this planet, we all share this internet, who am I out there? Who are they? And of the they, which ones are friend or foe? And being able to find that and discover it and see who we're entangled with, whether they are adversary or ally, is critical, because we live in relationship. To be on the internet is to be in relationship. What that relationship is worth exploring. And we do that through a whole lot of data and observations that we collect. But Benjamin, you want to take people through the technology and how it's formed with the graph?
Sure. So what we're doing is we're going through and we're capturing the data. So we have sensors where are active and passive collection. So with that information coming in, we're able to understand what is involved in every single website out there in the IPv4 space. So if we go to a website and we crawl it, we're doing it from an end user perspective. We call that the virtual user that might be coming from a global proxy network, identifying itself as every type of operating system and type of device out there, whether it's a laptop or a mobile device. And when we're gathering this data, we're doing it as a user. So we're doing over 2 billion web requests a day. So we know what comes in and what goes out of every website. So for example, if I pull an image from Facebook or send out analytics to Google, we understand those relationships and we can map them. And when that data comes in, it allows us to understand what's happening. So for example, our security researchers and threat intelligence people might find a way of fingerprinting and identifying some infrastructure or a vulnerability or a threat actor. They talk to the data scientists, they create some machine learning algorithms that can do it in scale. And as that data comes in, we also have our data sets, but also derive data sets like all the malware, the spam, the accomplice list is people that might have legitimate sites that are hosting bad things that they're unaware of. So we understand these relationships and we can even roll back in time. So if they come up with a new way of identifying a threat, if the single piece of data could illuminate everything, they can actually, every single day we take the new piece of data and merge in the old data, we can actually go through and roll back something to the very beginning and roll it forward. For example, we did that with cookies. So when we found that Turla could be tracked from tracking some cookies, it gave us the capability of then saying, we should go back in time and look for that and bring that data set forward and see if we can find these threats going backwards. And so that's what we're capable of doing. So with a single piece of malware, for example, we have the capability of infrastructure chaining that environment together to say that malware came from this IP address. There was a certificate associated with that IP. That cert was also associated with a domain and other IPs, and build out these layers to understand the full extent of that threat. Now, what we found out was with open source intelligence articles, a lot of our community, we have over 100,000 community members, they were running those same queries. So they read the article, they come to our platform, they would type in those IPs and domains and hashes to look for things. And what we found out was a lot of them were doing this, so we thought we could make their life even easier. So a lot of those articles are published with those indicators in an image or someplace where it's very hard, you have to type them in. So we wanted to take those articles, take those indicators out and make them that you can click on them and see them, but then also to extend them. So we also take that information and we extend it by having a threat analyst go through and look at it to see if there's anything new. So we can immediately understand the entire attack for articles that we wrote or other people wrote, to extend them to give you that full extent of that infrastructure at the time of publication that we see it, and to see if there's anything else that our data had that maybe those other people didn't know about. And with that, when we look at those indicators, we also give you the ability to do a reputation score on the IPs and domains. So we'll tell you if something's malicious, it's suspicious, it's neutral, or it's good. And we give you that understanding of why we came up with that score based upon the rules that have fired with it. So if you think about what we're trying to do, this is the cyber kill chain that everybody is familiar with. There's a piece that is outside your environment or outside your immediate control, and there's a piece that's inside your control. So if we divided this up, RiskIQ works outside the firewall. So we're looking at the deep and dark web, we're looking at the open web. So when someone's discussing an attack or planning it, there might be some chatter about it. They might be doing some scans, they might be looking for some vulnerabilities. There's a setup phase where that infrastructure is being stood up, and then the weaponization of that infrastructure. And then it's going to do like a phishing attack or an attack where if you just visit the website, maybe something loads, and that leads into the organization. So if you think about what happens with one of these attacks, you can see that over time, there's a lot of places where we can potentially intervene. So RiskIQ will usually see something within a day to 4 days prior to the attack happening, because during the purchasing of the typo squatted domain, for example, or the setup of that infrastructure, seeing if it's now email capable for the phish attack to happen, we can see it at different points. And if you can stop it before it comes into the organization, you save a lot of money and you save a lot of risk. So we try to give you that information. But what will generally happen over time is that once you find that potential threat and you mitigate it, then it might come back on a different IP address or a different piece of infrastructure that's out there. So we're constantly looking and seeing these things, and we have the ability to see if it goes away and it comes back, or it comes back on different infrastructure, to find it and let you know. So then we can keep this this information going. Now, like Josh had mentioned, everybody plays on the same battlefield, the internet, and with that, there are signals that everyone emits from their machines just because they're on the internet. So for example, if we have a threat actor in Brazil and we have a target that's in Canada, just from the person getting on the internet, there'll be IP addresses, net blocks, autonomous system numbers, and even ISPs, just from that person getting online. Now, when that person creates the email, now you'll see that there'll be the email provider, there'll be information in the email, there'll be attachments, there'll be languages that are associated with it, and even date and timestamps, so we can know what geographic location this person might be in. Then when it gets sent, it has to go through all the transit IPs, the net blocks, the autonomous systems to the victim. And if it's an HTML email, it can even fingerprint that machine, let the person know if they read it, and give some additional information. So all of these signals are capable of being understood and seen to help in these investigations. And then Josh, do you want to take the next two?
Well, and I just really like that that you didn't use the hooded person with no face, for the adversary and so forth. They are human beings that look just like you, yes. And many times you wouldn't even suspect. And very few wear hoodies, by the way. Yeah, there is digital residue that we're all emitting, and it happens by way of using the internet itself. And those are also things that organizations, you take the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, GCHQ, you take who else? Citizens Lab, and all that. They're doing this. Like these individual organizations to find real, clear, and present dangers on the internet, to find cyber criminals and cyber terrorism and people that are weaponizing the internet and preventing it from being safe. It's interesting that you called it a battlefield, right? But we think that the internet can actually become a safer place by unmasking it, and defeating those who would do us harm. And that's exactly how this is done. It's done through infrastructure chaining to piece together everything that was going on, because you can't do away with an observation. If it touches the internet, that's an observation, and we're going to capture that because who knows how it can be used later as a piece of evidence that can point out who did what to whom, when it happened, how it happened, and what we can do to prevent it in the future. And so, yeah. On the attack surface side, this is that whole me view. So what do I look like on the internet? What's my digital presence like? And being able to see what is an adversary or anyone, how do I appear out there on the internet? And so being able to see all of those aspects, understand where I'm vulnerable, what are the active exploits out there against such vulnerabilities, to help me understand the probability of exploit for myself, helps me to get ahead of these threats. And then ultimately understand how I relate to everything else there and get rid of those threats. And if you're considering using that alongside some of the Microsoft portfolio products, there is a nice little link there. It takes you to the documentation so you can access and do the calls for the EASN information into your, say like your Sentinel environment. And now on the next one. Is the threat intelligence side. So you can think about it, both are intelligence, both are security intelligence. One is about myself and one is about the adversary. And that's really where the threat intelligence comes in, where we're able to, yes, go through a ton of OSINT with a giant library, but then also enrich that with observations that RiskIQ is making as it's crawling the internet and identifying everybody in that graphing technology through the infrastructure chaining, being able to then add to OSINT key indicators that only we have, because we're the only ones out there combing through the entire internet and down into its depths and taking it through, hop in the DeLorean, go back in time to give the historical context of everything that moves and shakes on the internet. And in doing so, the primary thing that we see happen with those organizations is they're able to fingerprint. And by fingerprinting adversary threat infrastructure, when it spins up today and disappears tomorrow and then reappears somewhere else, you still get that fingerprint. And so even if something hasn't been weaponized, even if something is not actively deploying a threat campaign against you or someone else or one of your interests, that can still be a threat that is going to be deployed tomorrow. So being able to protect yourself against threats today and those yet to be deployed by fingerprinting them, identifying where they are on the internet so you can proactively shield defenses against it, wherever it may appear, and wherever your digital footprint moves and evolves. So you can go to the next one.
Yeah, and so the next one is talking about the different use cases that we're going to show today. Tim just sent me a message. He's about 13 minutes out. So
okay,
so we're it's going good. So what I'm going to do is,
have you noticed how much we're stalling?
So we're not going to do the ransomware use case just yet.
Okay.
And so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to do the ones that are integrated just yet until we see Tim's piece. So I'm going to talk about, we're going to do an OSINT article investigation where I went through and I found some additional infrastructure that was recently published in an article that just came out just a day or two ago. So we're going to start with that one. That was going to be like an added one that I had on the very bottom.
That was our bonus one.
It was a bonus one. So I'm going to start with that one. And then what we'll do is
bonus.
And then we'll go into the vulnerability intelligence and look at that. And then Tim will be here. And then we'll go back, do his ransomware. And then I'll do the integrated Sentinel and Defender use cases. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm just going to.
And just real quick, before you go into that, just, by way of definition, folks, when we talk about vulnerability intelligence, we're not necessarily talking about 0 days or N days in particular, but primarily the presence of the vulnerability and evidence of its exploitation in the wild. So when you combine those two things together, I have it and it's being exploited in the wild, that raises the bar on its priority. So less so about, hey, this is a 0 day, go get it done as soon as patch is available, or this is a long lasting end day that you still haven't gotten around to. That's not as intelligent. You can get that from MITRE or the CWE web pages and so forth. That's easy. Yes, but the real thing is, do I have it? Is it in my environment? And is there active exploitation of it? And that's what we try to show you with the intelligence. So you can, again, prioritize, not necessarily based on the time of disclosure, but is there relevant exploitation?
Hey, Josh and Benjamin, I just want to slow down for a second. I think there's a lot of new people on this workshop. So is this the point? Yeah, we've had a lot of questions about logging in. Can you share this link again? So is this the point where you'd like them to follow along?
Correct. I like to log into the system. And
great.
Once you log in and everybody's online, we'll jump in and start the investigation.
Okay, so go to community.riskiq.com, use the account as your login, and then the password that we provided, it's in the chat. If we need to provide that again, we are happy to do that. They should work. I know a couple of people have said it doesn't work, but just try it again. They should work. And I think just know, Benjamin, we've got a lot of new folks on here, so you might.
Correct. So I'll go slow and I'll explain the interface and I'll go through it all. So here's the URL to get to, and I will paste in the credentials again. The account and passwords are case sensitive. Okay. And I am going to increase my font. Jackie, I know you're going to tell me that right away. So
yeah, I'm not wearing my glasses today, so we're going to need that.
Okay. So I'll give everybody a second and raise your hand if you've logged in the okay. So I'm seeing a bunch of people. And once I get
Benjamin, you
go ahead.
You can give another click in with the Zoom.
Okay.
On the browser.
Okay, please. Thank you. Let me know is that okay,
Perfect.
or you think?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about this interface real quick. So this is our threat intelligence portal. It's the beginning of Illuminate. So this is where you can come in and I can type in an email address, I can type in a phrase, I can type in a word, and it will look to see, were there any open source intelligence articles? Was that IP address talked about in any articles? Were there, I can type in a CVE. Tell me about the CVE, any CVE. And once you type it in, more information shows up and you can go from there. What we're going to focus on is this article to begin with. Okay, and then we'll go through and I'll talk about the attack surface and about the third parties. And my view is a little bit different than yours because I'm logged in with my credential, looking at my organization, but I have the organizations that are set up for you in the lab also in my profile. So we'll use those. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at this article right here, this vagabond fish kit. So I was looking at different things to do for the workshop, and this article just came out. This was on November 3rd. So that was just, a few days ago. So 6 days ago. So I went through and I was reading this article, and a few things caught my mind. So when I read this, it talked about this credential harvesting and multiple types of fish kits that were stitched together like a Frankenstein to be able to understand what was out here. So it's a really good description of exactly what happens, and there's information about it. But as we get down to the bottom, I saw that there was a reference article to a Microsoft article. So I'm going to right click on that and open that up in another tab. Okay. So inside of here, it went through and it explained some cool things, but they did one further piece of analysis. And this is where I had mentioned that we pull things out of images sometimes. And I always like to go look at the images to see if anything was missed. So when I got to this section right here, okay, talking about piecing these things together, there was a side-by-side comparison between two kits right here. And I said, oh, that's pretty cool. And they pointed out that this link that was referenced in here actually was where this part of the credential harvesting piece was coming from. And I said, oh, I like to make sure that, that piece was investigated or was part of the article, because sometimes things get missed. And when I looked at this dancevita.com, if we go back to the other tab and I go back up to the top real quick, there'll be an area where we have indicators. And so if it was based upon somebody else's research, there'll be public indicators because those are already published. And then RiskIQ indicators are where our threat analysts have gone through and did their own research or found additional pieces. But when I looked at the different domains that were listed here, that domain wasn't listed. So it piqued my interest to say, let me go through and look at some of these, but I want to go back and I want to look at that domain in the tool. So what we're going to do is if we open up one of these, so I'm just going to right click. So there's two different ways that we can do it. If I click on it, it just takes me there and I lose where I was. And I like to investigate, think of it like a tree. I'm on the trunk of the tree and I go down a branch, and sometimes that avenue of investigation just stops. And I want to go back to the trunk and go down a different branch. So I like to do my investigations by opening it up in a new browser, in a new tab. So I right click and open in a new tab. And that gives me the capability of being able to jump back to those tabs, or I can save all of my browser tabs into a folder and it preserves my investigation a little bit. So if I'm going through or if I have to jump to a meeting or something, I can save everything and then open them all up again and then go back and investigate. So when I look at this, I want to explain real quick what you're seeing on the screen. So the very top part is our reputation score on that particular domain that we just looked at. And the first thing it says, hey, it was mentioned in a threat intel article. So it's bad because we've mentioned it in something that's saying that this was bad. And then the IP address is associated with something that's suspicious. That's what this yellow score is here. So that gives me some information to say, hey, this is a bad thing right away. Now, this analyst insights are questions that analysts might have when you're looking at something like, hey, has it been blacklisted? Is it a newly observed domain? It's just been put on the internet. As a new subdomain happened, did the Whois information change? So there's all these different insights that come up. This heat map tells me about its time on the internet. And this represents 6 months worth of time. And each square represents a particular day. Now, if we look at this legend here, you'll see that the curve on the top means that's the beginning of the month. So that's like here, okay? The curve on the bottom is the end of a month. And that's like here, okay? Now, as threat investigators or incident responders, you're probably never told during the attack. It's always after the fact. We had this attack, we did this thing, we need you to do this investigation, figure out what's happening. So if there's a lot of data, sometimes it's easy if you can isolate the view down to just be that period of time. So if I select one square, it will filter the results to show me that information on that particular day. And if I choose and hold down the shift key and choose another section, it will now show me that entire period of time. When we go through other examples, you'll see that if there's a lot of data, more than 6 months, there'll be another window down below. And this is the data map that will show you all period of time that we collected data for. And you can click on any section and see that 6 month window of time, and it will filter the results down. And if I want to like reset everything, I can just refresh the screen, or I can go to a different period of time. But because there's less than 6 months, that window isn't there, okay? Now, down below are the A records. So this is all of the information that we saw of what IP address was responding to that in that domain. So when you went to that domain, these are the 2 different IP addresses. We give you the location. So these were in Russia. We give you the ASNs that they're associated with, and the first and last scene. So these dates are really important, because if we talk about, let's say, a web component, something that's installed or running on a system, you can see when the first time we saw it and the last time. So if something that's been replaced, let's say patched, you'll see a new date. So we can tell you when it happened, when it was vulnerable and when it wasn't vulnerable. So if something gets attacked, we can go back in time and say, hey, it was attacked during this period of time and it was fixed because this patch fixed that vulnerability, for example. So we'll be able to do that, okay? Now, we also have Whois information, who's been registered to, who owns this domain, the certificates, subdomains that were associated with this particular domain, trackers. These are the little bits of codes like Google Analytics, clicky IDs, New Relics, components. These are the different components that we see running on this, okay? And the one that I want to focus on right now is the host pairs. So the host pairs is, let's say when you visit a website, you might be pulling things in from one place or sending things out from another place. So in this particular case, I wanted to look at to see if there was any additional linkage to any other infrastructure. And it's only pointing to YouTube. So there on that page, there was a link to say, hey, go to, there's some, I pulled something from YouTube. So there was really nothing associated with this. So the avenue of investigation to find more really wasn't here. But remember, we had this particular thing. So I'm going to type it into and search it, and then I'm going to paste it into the chat so everyone can just click on it, okay? So let me do that. So this is dancevita.com. So I'm going to come in here, dancevita.com, and I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it in the chat for everybody. So you can just click on it, and you can get to the same spot. So remember, this is where the bad code was. This is where the credential harvesting piece was in those 2 different tools that were Frankenstein together. One was an original one was like pieced together, had this thing in common, okay? So if you notice, it's going back to 2010. Okay, August 25th, 2010 was the first time that we observed this. And we've been around for more than 10 years. And we saw that, hey, there's some activity as of the 9th, which is today. Okay. And here's that data bar. And if you notice, I can go back to the very beginning of time. I can click on that first part and see the data that's there. Or I can go to another part of time. And when I do that, instantly the bottom is refreshed. And I'm going to go to the far right now and see the data as it's today. Okay. So when we look at this, I'm just going to refresh it one more time to make sure that everything is good and we can see everything. So now I've reset the entire view and you can see all the results down below. If we take a look at the Whois information, we can see the history. So we go back all the way to 2013. I can see who it was registered. It was registered to an individual. And I can go back and see how it is today. It's all been anonymized, okay? There's certificates associated with this. So let's see what type of certificate. So when I look at this, oh, it's a Let's Encrypt certificate. So this is a free certificate authority. Doesn't mean it's bad on its own, but when we start looking at all these pieces, you're going to notice that there's a lot of suspicious things. And my rule of thumb is if I see 3 or more, I can tell that it's bad, okay? So if we look at these, we can understand now that there's all these Let's Encrypt certificates going back in time. But if we go look at the host pairs, this is where the beauty comes in. Remember, I told you that because we're crawling the internet as a real user, when we go visit the page, we bring that data back and we merge it together. So if I see that one site is connecting to another one, as it goes back into the back end and goes into that database, I can see how they're all linked together. And if I notice here, there's 350 different domains, okay? And I'm going to change this to show 500, okay? So now I'm going to see all 500 results. And let's start looking at these things. And we'll look over time and see if we determine if they were involved in phishing or not. So if I scroll back and I go to 500, so I'm going to the very bottom, okay? You'll notice that there's a nice pattern with these things. So back in 2018, we started to see some of these domains coming up. And you can see, hey, it's been blocklisted for phishing. And this was back in 2020. We're going back. And as you see, we're getting more and more things saying, hey, this is phish, this is phish, this is phish. All of these are coming back, okay? So now let's do this. Let's do some fun stuff with this. So I'm going to go up to the top now. And let's look at one of these. Let's see. Here, we have this one right here. So I'm going to right click and open another tab. And I'm going to copy this and paste it into the chat for you. Okay. So now we're looking at this one and we're seeing, hey, it's up. There's a tracker associated with it. Okay. It's a bit.ly ID. There's some components associated with this. Okay. There's some host pairs associated with this. Hey, it's been blocked for phishing. There was a showing that, hey, there was a link to this login message encryption-portal.ml that said it was phishing. But now I really want to look at this. I want to be able to see if there was something associated with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up another tab. And I'm going to go to URL scan.io. Okay, so I'm going to copy this real quick. I'm going to paste this in here. And the reason why I'm doing this is I want to see an image of the website. I want to look at it. So I'm going to show you how I do it. Okay, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to copy this domain. And I'm going into here. Instead of just telling it to go out there and scan it right now, I'm going to go click on search. I'm going to see if anybody else had submitted something to be crawled from them and see that data. So I'm going to submit this domain and I'm going to have it come back. So 22 hours ago, there was some stuff and there was 2 days ago. So I'm going to go to the 2 days ago and I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to paste this in so you can see it directly. And let's look at it. So here's an image of it. And remember, this is involved in credential harvesting and Microsoft and both RiskIQ talked about it. And here's a picture of it asking, hey, because you're accessing sensitive info, you need to verify your account and it wants to know your email and password. So this is stealing your credentials. So even though that the system didn't mark it as, hey, this is involved in phishing right now. It is. And what's really funny is that every single one of these, all 350 of these, are all involved in credential harvesting. So if we go back to the article and we take a look at this, there's 31 indicators saying there's 31 pieces of bad infrastructure, but actually there's an additional 350 pieces of bad infrastructure. And every single one of these domains is credential harvesting right now that are out there. Any questions, Jackie or Josh or?
Yeah, we are having a login issue. So I think for now people can follow along, and then maybe we can extend the trial just a little bit after the workshop so they can.
Let me just check the credential real quick, make sure that there's nothing that on my side that I did. I'm on another screen real quick.
It shouldn't be. I just reset the password, so we're not sure why. What's the issue?
So you changed it to a new password?
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so can you change it back to that other password or no? Or
yeah, I can.
I just want to make sure that everyone has the correct password to get in. And if you change it, does that kick people out if it's if they typed it in before?
No, not necessarily, but people just have to follow along.
Okay. Give me 1 second. I just want to make sure.
And
it shows that it's disabled. So hold on. Okay. So now it's not disabled. So they should be able to get in now. It was disabled in the system.
Which password? The first one? Let's just put it back in.
Yeah, so if you can make it back to the original password then people should be able to get in.
Okay.
Okay.
And Tim has joined us too. He made it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what's really nice about this use case is that even though we had threat researchers that went through and did the investigation on both sides, at Microsoft and the RiskIQ threat researchers, there's still nuggets in there that you can find and you can investigate. Just like what I did was I went through and I actually read the articles and I looked and I said, oh, here's something that they're pointing out. Oh, that's a cool domain. Let me go look at it. And I went to go look at it and I go, oh, it's not part of the article. So as soon as we're done today, I'll be talking to our research group to say, add this piece in there as an indicator, because I found 350 and I did some spot checks with that. And I found several in here. So let's find another one. So if I just copy this and I go back to the URL scan.io and I go back to search, and if I look, here's another credential harvesting. So every single one of those that I picked and I looked at was involved in credential harvesting. So all 350 are bad. So what I could do as an analyst, I can come in and take all of these domains and download them, get a CSV. I can send them off to my team and I can block them immediately and say, don't allow any traffic to or from these places. And it will protect me from those credential harvesters that come up. So Tim, are you back?
I am back. Yeah, definitely a bit of an adventure, but I'm here.
Okay. So Tim, I covered just a regular generic RiskIQ use case. And if you want, we can jump back and do your piece of the ransomware investigation. And then we can jump in and I can do the integrated use cases. And we have less than an hour to do those. So I'll turn it back to you. So do you want me to stop sharing and you share, or do you want me to, how would you like to do it?
Yeah, sounds good. Do you want me to skip I had some sort of slides explaining XDR. Do you want me to skip those and just jump straight into the product?
No, go ahead and hit those just for a second, just to give people that aren't familiar with it, the information.
Cool. Let me just find the screen.
And thank you so much for driving to a new location to jump back on.
Oh, good. No worries. Are you seeing my screen?
I don't see your screen yet,
Okay.
but I see you.
All right. Well, that's a good start, I guess. Actually, maybe if you just share them, that might be easier.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just dealing with a unique setup here.
Okay, give me 1 second. So
yeah, I think slide 39 was where I was picking up.
And let me share my screen real quick. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. And I apologize. I'm sure I've missed some context, but at least from the polls that we had first thing this morning, it was really interesting to see sort of what was top of mind for people in terms of both the types of threats and attacks that we're all thinking about and obviously concerned about, but also in the types of tools and responses and products that are available to be able to not just remediate and mitigate those, but also to prevent them as well. And so that's what's really exciting here with the integration of SIM and XDR, but also threat intelligence with platforms like what you've just seen from Benjamin and RiskIQ is, threat intelligence can equal really solid prevention. And so some pretty exciting stuff there. So I'll go through these pretty quickly because I think, definitely get the feeling that the audience is fairly well up to speed with what XDR is and maybe even how it works and that kind of thing. So we'll blast through this quickly, but I think it's important to sort of level set what is XDR. How does it work? Why are we sort of even in this realm of talking about cross workload detection, response, and indeed prevention as well. And, I like the Gartner definition where it talks to natively integrating multiple security products. So, you're used to having a half dozen or a dozen or even more different vendors, different providers, different products that are all sort of sharing data or maybe not sharing data. And that's the beauty of XDR and SIM and being able to apply this threat intelligence is being able to understand how all those workloads come together, what all that data means, no longer in isolation, but together. So if you were to think about the traditional sort of attack, it's no longer within one area anymore. It's not just email, it's not just credential. We have this concept of lateral movement. And the example that Benjamin and I will show you is how does a ransomware attack break in through that perimeter and then spread? And if you're using siloed teams or siloed products, it can take a long time or be almost impossible to put those pieces together. And by the time you do, the half-life of the attack is over, the damage has been done. And so problem meets solution. XDR, SIM and XDR and threat intelligence together bring all of that data holistically together so that you can understand these attacks in their entirety and not just understand them, but be able to respond and mitigate. And as Benjamin and co have been talking about is be able to sort of understand the full scope and breadth of those threats as well. So super interesting, super exciting stuff. If we can go to the next slide, please. This is a slide I like to share because it's almost 3 years old. And I love that because these numbers were frightening 3 years ago and think about how much more frightening they are now. And so just to sort of give some context, in 2019, we'd seen a 95% increase in the cost of a breach. Security teams were using 50 or more tools. We'd seen a almost 70% increase in attacks in the last 5 years. Those are frightening numbers. And, think about what those have done over the last 3 years when we've been, in this new working model of everybody work from home, bring your own device, bring your own network. I'm accessing secure corporate resources, Exhibit A in a friend's house where his kids play Xbox on the same network that we're having this conversation. So think of the headaches for security teams that have been created just from the new nature of the way we work. And so the modern workplace brings with it vulnerabilities to the modern attack. And just think about how these have sort of developed over the last 2 or 3 years. and then we think about resource. So we have, a massive shortage of qualified individuals who are capable of working with this stuff. And not just that, but the monumental, absolutely colossal amount of information that we play with every day. And so you need these types of integrated, cohesive tools to be able to pull that data together and make sense of it within the context of what's going on. And that's what gets me really excited about threat intelligence and RiskIQ is like, hey, go from Sentinel, go from XDR, plug in some of these IPs, hunt down some of these URLs, see who's been touching them, block them, and there's your feedback loop. You're now proactively securing that perimeter. So some pretty neat stuff. If we go to the next one, please. And this one builds out, so maybe just click it a couple of times. Once more, yeah, there we go. And so this is sort of, and I won't spend too long on this. So this is sort of how at Microsoft we think about this realm. So at the top layer, we have the SIM tool, which is Microsoft Sentinel. And I like to think of Sentinel as kind of your giant data vacuum cleaner. Basically, it's sucking up all of this information from every tool, every workload, everything within your ecosystem, your environment, every cloud, every third-party vendor, whatever's out there. This is your tool to pull it all together and really sort of analyze across that data and be able to understand how broad something has reached, hunt across all that data, and indeed integrate with things like threat intelligence to close that loop and get proactive again about prevention. At the XDR layer, where we're thinking very much about sort of post-breach, we're thinking about the inherent prevention capabilities of the products within it, but also how we analyze, detect, and respond to threats as well. And so we look at that in two different ways. The end user side, which is Microsoft 365 Defender. There's products in there I'm sure you know and love, like Defender for Identity, Defender for Endpoint, Office 365, and Defender for Cloud Applications as well. On the cloud side, which is where Defender for Cloud lives, this is sort of your SQL, your storage, all your cloud workloads within Azure, IoT, et cetera, all live in that world and come together at the top of the pyramid with the SIM layer on top there. And if we move on.
Okay, give me a quick second.
Yeah. And we can probably skip through these actually, Benjamin. Okay. These are just the sort of, and I'm sure we're sharing these slides.
We're going to give these out to everybody. Do you want to just jump in?
Yeah, let's just dive in. And these just sort of give you a bit of a reflection of everything that's out there. So, and again, if you have any questions, I'm always available. I'm sure we share details as well. So let me... Hopefully I can figure out how to share my screen here.
There you go.
Awesome. Okay, so we are in Azure Sentinel, and hopefully people have maybe seen Sentinel before, are sort of relatively familiar with a SIM tool in general, or hopefully especially this one. So as a security professional, maybe this is where I start my day. I'm looking at the sort of overall state of my business. I can track how many events we have, how many incidents, how many alerts, and just all of that signal data, whatever's going on within my environment. This is obviously a demo environment, so it's been hydrated with all kinds of weird and wonderful and horrible threats that exist out there in the world, just so that we can show these kinds of demonstrations. So I'm going to dive into incidents, and we will find something here that is a bit scary, and then we will dive down into the XDR tool and play with it there. So this is a relatively fresh one, so we'll have a look and see what's in here. Maybe we have some malicious activity. And let me just hide the Zoom piece. There we go. All right. So as I was mentioning, like we have everything from across the organization coming into this tool. So at the Sentinel layer, if something's come in through an IoT device, maybe I have a connected toaster in the staff room at the office, and for some reason that toaster is connecting to the network at 3 o'clock every morning and sending 5 petabytes of data to Uzbekistan. Maybe that is normal behavior for my connected toaster. In this office, that is unusual. And so for that device to then have gone into my cloud environment, found some cloud administrator credentials, spread itself across the organization and spread to different devices and users, we know we've got a pretty significant problem. And Sentinel and XDR is where you're going to see that kind of thing, because it's pulling all these different sort of siloed and individual alerts that are scary in their, in their own right, into a single cohesive incident where we can see that they're actually all related. One of those things was the entry point, but what's actually happened is that scary lateral movement that's gone out across the organization. And so we can see that here where maybe I'll choose a different one, but we can see, hey, we've got this device, we've got an IP out there, we've got 5 different events that's created one alert, which has also then created this incident. If we look at one from, say, Microsoft 365 Defender, we can see that this one's come in through MCAS, so through our cloud app security workload. And I will try and find one. I had it all set up, and then jumping in the car seems to have reset a lot of these, but here's a good one where we can see there are 4 different alerts. Again, these have all probably come from the same platform. But as we jump into XDR, you'll see one where we can actually see it's come from all of the different workloads. So I'm having some issues with this one. So let's just jump straight across. So at the XDR layer, I'm playing here in Microsoft 365 Defender. We'll find a ransomware alert or incident in here, and we'll chase it all the way through, and then have a look at how the threat intelligence layer with RiskIQ really enriches what we're able to see here. And the alert that I would have used in Sentinel that is actually in the slides that will be shared with you, so you can chase that down in your own time. But the Sentinel one's really interesting because it's a unique incident where an RDP port was left exposed on a cloud workload. That is probably against most people's organizational policy. But
Tim, can I ask you a quick? So some people I want to make sure that there might be some people that don't understand what an RDP port is. Can you explain what RDP is, just so people get a level set? Because some people might not be. There might be people doing vulnerability stuff. They're not threat investigators.
Yeah, totally. So really, we've just got some kind of access to the network that has been left exposed to the internet. And maybe it's somewhere where people share files or upload content or collaborate on things. And it's generally a good sort of policy or configuration to not have that kind of thing exposed out in the wild. And it's actually remarkably common for that kind of thing to be left exposed, to be left out there, simply because it's easy and people still use them. And the easy thing from a configuration perspective is just to block them all, to stop it. And a lot of times you'll see that process was left open for a reason, because people still use it. They still like to have that there to be able to leverage. And the solution is fairly simple. It's, you can do something like implement a just-in-time access control. So you might have multi-factor authentication, or you only turn on access when it's needed rather than leaving it open all the time. And so fairly simple problem, fairly simple solution, but so often those vulnerabilities get left open, and it's just a case of we call it security hygiene.
Yeah, and the RDP port is the 3389, which is used for like remote access, so like terminal services, or you have your RDP client on your desktop to open up a machine or a workstation internally. That's what that connection is. So somebody left a connection open for somebody to connect up and maybe do some remote work or something. That's kind of what happened, probably. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thank you. And so someone's been able to exploit that and then move laterally across the organization, which is like I said, a simple problem with a simple solution, but overwhelmingly, remarkably common. How frequently it still happens, and so that will lead us here. We're now down in our environment for Microsoft 365 Defender, looking at our sort of XDR world. And here is one of those incidents. So now that we're looking at this in its entirety, I can see, hey, I have 3 impacted devices. They could be, one of these that is just constantly trying to be found. These things always want to connect, or a laptop like the one I'm using, for impact users. So maybe Tim's credentials have been compromised, but hey, they didn't want mine. I don't have access to very much sensitive stuff, but hey, Benjamin does, and so maybe they used my credentials to get to him, and then they've spread to Jackie. And so you've got this issue with lateral movement, that if we were only chasing down that entry point, just the RDP port, yes, we've solved the problem, but we've solved it just for the initial entry. We haven't solved the problem of what happened next. And that's where XDR is so powerful.
Yeah, so that first machine is just used to get through the front door. And then the other machines, as they move laterally, that's where the real badness happens. So it's like when there's a vulnerability, and it's a minor vulnerability, but if I chain 3 or 4 of them together, I can really do some damage. The first one just gets me in. The second one gives me elevated privilege. The next one gets me maybe a terminal or command prompt where I can really start running and doing bad things.
Exactly. And then what's the first thing you're going to do, Benjamin, when you are that person? You've got those sort of administrator mode credentials. You can now start doing some damage, but the first thing you're going to do is start covering your tracks as well. So while I'm over here busy chasing that RDP port and implementing cloud hygiene, I've got this problem that is now snowballing behind the scenes. Benjamin's covering his tracks. He's disabling things like antivirus. He's moved on. He's beyond what I'm already
clearing logs, things like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so that spread becomes really, really scary. And so this is what is so awesome about being able to see all of that stuff in one place. So like I said before, with how XDR combines these workloads, I'm not jumping out anymore to 3 different products or 3 different portals to investigate or solve this. I can do it all from here. And most of this stuff as well has already been resolved. So something like a suspicious URL that someone clicked on one of these devices, that's already been blocked. And so I think it's something like 90 to 95% of these alerts can be automatically dealt with without even needing me to touch them or do anything on them. So pretty powerful, the amount of sort of automatic remediation that can happen there. We can dive, I'm just conscious of time, Benjamin, so I'll hand over to you very quickly, but we can investigate each of these alerts individually. I can sort of look at them at that layer of signal detail or signal depth. I can see which ones have been resolved already, which ones still need to be dealt with. And we can do that across devices, across users, mailbox, etc. We can dive into the investigation, so we can see, hey, here's actually what happened. Here's the URL they clicked on, and that would be a great way to hand over to see, hey, let's chase down that URL within RiskIQ. Let's see what's happening behind the scenes, and then we can also kind of
this is what I love. I love this one. This is incredible to be able to see it visually.
Yeah, and you can do this both in XDR and in Sentinel, and it's really, really powerful because you get such a good look at, hey, how does lateral movement actually work? And look at this entry point, through that RDP port, or hey, from there it's gone to a VM or to a device, and from there it's been able to touch 3 users. There's Tim, Benjamin, and Jackie, who all need some serious training on credential protection and MFA. And here are the EXEs it's been able to lie in wait in different workloads inside cloud apps. It's a really, really powerful way just to see what was touched and how did they move between these different entities. And in the tool, you can actually explore every one of these alerts, every one of these assets, have a look at its state. Has it been remediated back to a safe state? What else do we need to do? We can also hunt. We can hunt through simple KQL across all of our data, take those queries from here up to Sentinel and do it across that entire business data layer as well. So very, very, very powerful.
So I should change. It's like the Spider-Man movie. My password is password. That's not good.
Yeah,
I need to change it.
We should add a few numbers and exclamation marks into that.
Well, when you look at the ability to bring all the information from all the different sources and be able to see it in one place and understand the state of each piece, that's the hard part. Is when you have these types of attacks with the lateral movement that might be, passing the hash where they've taken the password hash and now using that to get into other places. That's the hard thing, is to keep track. What's been blocked, what's active, where is it now, where is it spread? But with a graph, you can immediately know, hey, there's 3 different places. There's a domain that's outside that it's sending stuff to. Those are the pieces that you can immediately now say, okay, let's disable these accounts, let's isolate these machines, let's start the remediation, let's figure out what was taken. This is where the rubber meets the road, to understand at a moment's notice what's the state of it and what do you need to do next.
100%. Yeah. And we have an IP here. We saw a URL before that we were curious. People have been clicking on that from different machines. Maybe this is a good spot to hand over and dive into some threat intelligence and see what we can enrich this with.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into my system that has a little bit other data to explain this and show in detail like what you're capable of doing. So give me a quick second. I'm going to share my screen. Just need to find the Zoom window. Here it goes. Let me share my desktop. And what I'm going to do is bring up my Sentinel. Okay. And inside of here, I'm going to show you like the typical thing that you might see, and then with the integration, what you can get and what is good about it. So if we take a look at an event that comes in. So when we take a look at this, there are some entities that are involved. There's an email, there's a IP address, and there's a domain, a URL that someone went to. So with that information, I would now need to go out and investigate each one of those. It might be I'm looking up in VirusTotal. It might be that I'm doing a Google search to figure out what this is. It might be that I'm using Illuminate to go and get more information. So I'm going to show you that how you can go through and look at some of these with Illuminate enabled inside of Sentinel and Defender to bring that information together, and it's bidirectional. So if I'm inside of RiskIQ, I can block something on Defender, or I can set an alert inside of Sentinel so I can be alerted if somebody else goes there. So as I'm investigating, I can put feedback into the system to say, block these things or alert me for conditions that occur. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the list and let me find the particular one. I think this is it. Let me see. Not this one. Yeah, here we go. So what happens is that same event that we looked at, this is what the workbook's enabled. Okay, so immediately from here, from this enrichment, without doing anything, the investigator can now go and look and say, hey, this is 100% malicious. Okay, RiskIQ, it says, hey, that domain is using a server that's more likely to be malicious. It's that domain is registered more likely to be malicious, and they saw some activity on there. So this domain got 100% score of being bad. It's also a self-signed certificate. So it's not even a free certificate. They created it themselves out of their own certificate authority. There's been malware seen on there. There's it's been involved with fake Kaseya and dropping Cobalt Strike. So now I know, okay, Cobalt Strike's involved in there. Revil is also, there's been an article talking about this. So this is from the integration between the threat intelligence and your indicators to say, I have this thing, what do you know about it? What can you tell me about it? So I get all of these things automatically, including, we ran a bunch of different ones just so you can see the capability. So all of the different tabs that are inside of RiskIQ are automatically here with accounts. So like there's 42 different components, 10 different host pairs. So things going in and out of the website that we looked at where we found those 350 with that other, that's where that is. Cookies, hashes, articles. So there were 2 articles. And then we're looking at the DNS to see, okay, it's involved with mail. There's the MX record, all these things that are in here. So what I can do from the RiskIQ perspective, I can actually open this up and go inside of RiskIQ, and I can look at the article. So inside of here, there were public indicators. So there was an article that someone published, and they talked about these particular things. There was one IP, some hashes, and some URLs. And then RiskIQ went out and grabbed some more. So in this particular case, the domain that we were looking at was status.notify-epay. So I can come into here and look for that status.notify.epay. Let me see.
Down at the bottom.
There it is. So thank you, Jackie. So now that I open this, I'm now deep inside the advanced search inside of RiskIQ. What's nice about this is that it has that bidirectional support. So if I go inside of Microsoft, I can actually see the defender information. I can see the name of the box and when this activity was last seen, its IP address and its internal IP address, so external and internal IP address. So I can, as I'm searching, if something hits from the inside, I can see it. But I can also come in and put a block in place and say, block this. So no one else can go there in the organization. So as I'm going through and doing my research and say, oh yeah, this is bad. It's been blocklisted. I don't want anybody to go there. I can send the signal and kill it for the organization that no one else will go there. It's blocked and have that. And we can see that it's involved in these Revol and ransomware, okay? Now, the other thing is that as I go through and I investigate further, so I can go to the IP address. So remember, the IP address that was associated with this, I'm just going to come over, it was 52. So if I come in here and I say, hey, there's a different IP address associated with it, I can open that one up now. And as I'm drilling through, I can look to see if there is any other tie-ins with this. So as I go through, I got another hit from a Microsoft Defender. So I can see, oh, that particular box also hit this IP address. And that could be because when they went to the domain, it went to that IP address. So if I go back and look at the resolutions, that status one isn't listed here. So no, they actually hit this new IP address. So that's a new indicator. So I can now come back in and I can say, hey, let me create an alert for that. So I can create the alert now in Sentinel to say, anybody else hit this IP, I want that. I want to know about it. And I can even go in and I can block that IP address. So now as I'm going through and doing the investigation, I'm doing some of the remediation right now and taking care of this without having to jump back into the system. So if I go back and even drill in some more, I can go into alert.notify. I can go into this other one, and there's even a UPS order status. So I'm going to open up all those. So as I go through and I'm going through, oh, here I have 3 hits. So if I take a look, I can see, hey, in Sentinel, here's the alerts that happened. Okay, so somebody hit an alert on this one earlier and that box had hit it. So I can see the information inside the interface. And I'm going to the next one now, notify epay. Oh, 2 more. So I got the Sentinel alert and I have the Microsoft Defender that alert as well, that blocked that it was, hey, this machine was in there, okay? And then if I come down now to the UPS store status one, I can see that machine also communicated with that. So it gives me that capability of now, as I walk through an investigation, or in this case, linking to that article and finding those other indicators and looking at them, I can see the traffic on the inside that hit those places and be able to block them right here inside of the Illuminate interface. Now, I'm just gonna, yes.
There's a question in the chat, and I think it got answered, but I don't know, Tim, if you want to expand on that. Where blocking occurs when we press the block button, firewall or endpoint.
It's blocking on the endpoint. So the Defender endpoint will now, all those, it's that, remember the graph that we showed, like it was the device, the ball. When we block it, now all the endpoints now are protected and they're not going to be able to go there. It's going to get that big red, hey, you can't visit that site. So they're blocked at that point.
And they're asking if they can do it on the firewall, block it on the firewall as well.
I'll have to go back and look at it. The way I think it's implemented is through Defender directly. So it depends on how Defender is configured, I think. But I think it's just the agent itself is doing the blocking on that. Yeah. But you now have the domains and IPs. So for example, in this particular case, I could just open up that article and be able to take all that information and be able to take those indicators and just download them and block them. So I can come in here and download those indicators, have that list, and be able to copy and paste and put them in to block them on the firewalls if I needed to, and roll out that policy. Is that right, Tim? Keep me honest. You're the...
Yep, so far so good. And I think it's really interesting because we were able to take this incident that we chased down and for the better part solved, but we had this IP that we were then able to go and expand on and like discover all of this. So it's pretty amazing sort of how like the breadth of prevention that you can achieve.
Yeah, the other thing I want to show is now I get another alert that came in, and it's with a particular IP address. And I'm like, okay, what is this IP address? Okay, so if I went to RiskIQ and I typed in the IP address, okay, so immediately a couple things pop up, okay? It's telling me, hey, it's bad. There's an article talking about this, the wizard spire and ransomware, and a Windows 0-day exploit. It's also involved in Cobalt Strike, okay? So that IP address has been linked directly to a tool. And so there's a cyber threat component to this that are very important. So with the Cobalt Strike, I'm going to open up this. This is now our threat intelligence portal. So inside of here gives me additional information about tooling, backdoors, and threat actors. Okay. And in this particular case, it's talking about Cobalt Strike, which some organizations use to pen test and to check things out. But threat actors are also leveraging the same type of tooling to do bad with it. And what happens is, as we go through and we fingerprint all of the machines in the world and understand what's installed and what's running, we're able to find this infrastructure, okay? So right now, out of open source intelligence publications, they know about 2,453 of these Cobalt Strike servers in the world. Well, RiskIQ knows an additional 8,106. So as an organization, if I want to protect myself against a threat actor using Cobalt Strike, which can be, any of these nation states that we've seen, plus anybody else that has it or rents access to this tooling, all I would have to do is come through and download these indicators of IPs and domains and go and put them into my environment and inoculate my organization. It's like a vaccine for the Cobalt Strike. As we find new stuff, this list gets updated. And through an API, I can download this as well and have it available. So it's a way for you to protect yourself from these different things. So when I take a look, we're also actively monitoring PowerShell Empire, some backdoors that are in here, PlugX and ShadowPad. So if you look at the indicators, the additional things that we see, these are low-hanging fruit that an organization can come in and immediately put into action and help you find these things and stop them. So that one IP address that we had seen, if I copy this, okay, and I go into the tooling for Cobalt Strike, and I look at the indicators, I can actually search for it, and there it is. So that one particular IP address was through an open source. That's how we found out about it. But that's how it linked back to this place. So if we, from that initial query here, that IP address was cross-referenced to the threat intelligence that we had on those tools and threat actors, and to be able to say, hey, it was seen in this article. So if I went to this article, I can also look and see where it hit in the article. It will be under one of the IP addresses that are listed under the indicators. So inside of here, if I find it, there it is. So that's how it kind of hits. So think of it this way, is that if we know about you, if we understand the way that you look on the internet, we're able to filter all of this intelligence to give you the perspective of what's meaningful to you, or your third parties that you might deal with, or those threat actors that are out there. So as we're mapping the tooling and mapping this infrastructure, saying it's Microsoft, it's RiskIQ, it's Amazon, it's Johnson & Johnson, it's Shopify, whatever that organization is, we're able then to make that lens to say, now show me how that looks here. If I have a vulnerability, does that vulnerability exist in my environment? Does it exist in a third-party supply chain I want to look at, or even a competitor that I want to look at? Or is there a threat actor looking to attack using that? Is there deep and dark web chatter on it? So those two use cases showing the capability of taking that information and not only know about the current status, but how it relates to articles, to reputation score, to tooling, to threat actors, is just amazing to be able to go through and take that same information. So if I go back again and I look at here and look at the components, I get all that information right away. So I don't have to jump to the other system. I can take care of it, triage it, do it, but then I can extend the investigation further if I need to see, are there any other indicators I need to bring back in, I need to block like we showed in the previous one. Any questions that came up from showing this?
There's a few. I know Or's handling a couple of them.
Okay. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back and I'm going to talk about vulnerability intelligence, okay, and looking at yourself and others, and then we'll go through a use case, and then I'll show a workbook if you wanted to go through like a Jupyter notebook, and to be able to quickly do this and programmatically do it to search for these things. So if we take a look at attack surface observations, if you're logged into the system, you're going to see Shopify. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump to that one real quick. And drill into it, okay? So in the attack surface, so like if you created an account on Illuminate and you used your email address for your organization, we're gonna show you your own view of your org. We don't do it if you're using a Gmail address or a Mac.com or a Yahoo account, because that's not really your organization, that's just your free email provider. So you have to use your work email in order to see this. So let's say that we work for Shopify. So this is like where you would start off with your morning coffee, and this tells you the risks to your organization. And these are insights. So an insight is not just a CVE. It might be a CVE, but there might be some other intelligence in how we gather that information. It might be a deeper dive where we go look at the banner page. We might have submitted something, got some information back to verify that that is really bad or not. So insights are a little more deeper analysis than just throwing a CVE out there and be able to do it. But I'm going to show you both ways. So you can search for a CVE, get to see if that exists in the system, but insights are a little bit different. So if I drill into this, there is one issue that's on the system right now, and it's dealing with a squid proxy denial service vulnerability. So if we drill into it, immediately it gives me some information. It says, hey, there's a CVE, and if I right click and open on it, you can actually go out and get information about the CVE. And so this is going to pull that up. I'll let that load. Also the advisory information that was listed. Okay. And if I go back, even the GitHub information that talked about it. So we link all this information to it. Okay. So here's the CVE information. Okay. Now it's saying here that if it's before 3.515 and before 4x. So if I look down here, one of them is going to say squid proxy, Shopify, so many listed here. Let me Command F. There we go. 3110. So this is the what we see running there, okay? And it gives me the IP address. So if I drill into this, I can actually right-click, open on this, and see this information. This is going to take you into the advanced investigation view. And if I take a look at the components, you'll see that there's 1,000 components here. And if we look over time, you can see different types of things, first and last seen. So there might be like a jQuery. Hey, this was updated on November 6th, but it was first seen on the 31st. So you can see like when something gets swapped out. So I wanted you to be able to see that. Now, when we go into the actual CVE, there's a couple things that it talks about. So you can access this by just going out as well and starting off on the threat intel portal and typing in any CVE information. As soon as that happens, it starts to give you more information to say, hey, here are the affected components with it. Here are some third parties that also have it. I can drill in and get additional details. And this is the same view that it was that in the insight where I clicked on it, took me right to here. Now, it also gives you this priorities, a CWE, and if there is a proof of concept attack for this, like an exploit for this type of vulnerability, there would be a link for that as well. But then the other nice thing is it starts showing you the deep and dark web chatter about it. So if somebody is talking about the CVE and there's a known exploit, we're going to make that higher. So there's like over 20,000 different CVEs that are out there. But now this gives me the capability of going through and looking for these and seeing, you know, the scope of this. Now, I can also go through and look at the third parties that are impacted by this and dive into one of these. So let me see if I can just find one real quick to go look at. Pick Rolex. So inside of Rolex, I can look to see the different CVEs. I can understand this. Now, for each one of these organizations, I can also access it through our third parties that we're monitoring. So remember, I was just looking at the Rolex one. So if I dive into that one, I actually see the same view that I saw for myself. So that gives me the capability of doing apples to apples comparison. And I can go through and I can look at each individual one and drill in and say, hey, they have 5 observations here. Oh, this is with a push dairy crash on a crafted HTTP. It's with Apache. I can dive into it. I can get more information. And I can understand, you know, how it was discovered is because it's part of domain at rolex.com. So we link those together. But if I have many third parties that I'm relying upon, I might want to do this programmatically in a way to see how this impact was through a script. And this is how a lot of people are doing this today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my Jupyter notebook real quick. And we gave the link out earlier, and this will be in the notes that we send out to everybody. So you'll have access to be able to get this. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to clear the output, and I'm going to run it again for you so you can see it all. So I'm going to say run all.
Hey, Benjamin.
Yes.
I don't have my glasses on, so.
And I'm zooming in.
Thank you.
Okay. So as I'm running this, I'll kind of explain what this is. And so Mark Kendrick, who works for us, went through and we were talking about scenarios. And the scenario I had is, hey, there's an article published talking about a 0-day vulnerability with a particular CVE. And what happens is somebody walks into the office and says, hey, I just read this article. Does this affect us or our supply chain? Can you find out? And, you know, the people that have the boots on the ground hate those types of things. It's going to take them hours to figure out if they have it or not, because they're going to have to go talk to many different people on many different systems. And then for the third party stuff, they're relying upon somebody to say, yeah, we have it or we don't. And most of the time they're going to get bad information, or the person doesn't know and doesn't give them the right information. But because everyone plays on the same playing field, and we're going out there and crawling this information the same way for everybody, we're able to identify this. So as I go through, I ran this and it's already done. It just took like a minute. I put in 2 CVE numbers, and this was the CVE number that we were searching for on Shopify, okay? So immediately, if I look for this one, there's 2 sections. It looked for all the different groups. So I went through and said, look for 2 different ones so I can see, you can put in many different CVEs and run this at once. But this particular one, you can notice that Tencent had like 11,000 systems, they're the hosting provider. So if somebody is just renting Rackspace and puts a box out there and hasn't patched, they might have those. But as we go down, you can see the different hit on all of them. And Rolex had one machine that had that. And we looked at the Shopify one, has another one, okay? But as we go through and we get greater detail on that CVE, you can see I can bring in all the information about it. I can look to see if there's any articles that were published. These are the insights. And I can see, here it is. And then I can view at the component level. I can look at that insight and see how that broke down, because there might be a different way that we're detecting it. And then I can focus in on those and see the hits on them. And then I can even say, for Shopify, give me that hit list. And so what I did was I gave an example where I can just go to my third parties, type in the name, or partial name, and see those hits. So they were IP addresses. So there are 3 separate IP addresses associated with it. There was no host name, so nothing came back on that. But if I looked at the Rolex one, hey, there was a host, and I got the host name, but there was no IP address associated with it. So it gives me the capability of understanding what we saw, where we saw it. So if I was the third party, I can call Rolex and say, hey, you have this host that has this vulnerability. You need to fix it. And they can now have the right information of where to look. They don't have to hunt for it. And if they don't have RiskIQ, they can go get a free trial, log in, and see the exact information, because they're going to see their own organization and be able to have an apples to apples view of this. And as it gets fixed, it will fall off. So as we go through every day and we update the data, if they fixed it today, tomorrow when the scan is over, we're going to look and say, oh, it's no longer there. So it's a way for you to have peace of mind to know if you're secure or not, or the supply chain that you rely upon is cleared. And then if we're searching for the CVEs, I can even use that number that represents them. So for example, if I come back up, there's a number that associates with the name. So I can even search on that number and find out, here's Jacob Engineering, and here's some insights of active things that they have and the number of vulnerabilities that are out there that we see in their red, the 3 different levels, high, medium, and low of problems. And then I can look at my own and see, do I have that CVE in mind? So this is a PHP out of band denial service with PHP that is in our own. And this is on a box that we're using to do some running some ads and doing stuff. So it's normal for it to sometimes have vulnerable things, because we're trying to make it susceptible to be able to trigger things. And so now I can look to see if I have it. I can look to see if all of my third parties, how they look, or a particular third party, and get that detailed information to understand how that vulnerability affects my potential risk to my organization. Any questions? We have about 7 minutes left, 6 minutes left.
I think Or is answering a lot of them. There's a lot of third-party questions.
Okay.
Do you want to maybe, I don't know how much time you have, or if you were going to go on to something else, but third-party intelligence might be something you want to just highlight quickly.
Yeah, so with the third-party intelligence, we have the capability of having you can purchase any number of third parties that we can look at. And with that, as we're giving you the same sort of attack surface observations for yourself, we can actually give you those attack surface observations for others. So here's Russian Airlines. So
it's the same view,
the
right?
same view, apples to apples comparison. So I can drill in and see exactly, hey, what's happening here. They have 4 systems that are affected here. I can go back and say, let's look at the medium ones. Okay, so here are a few machines that are affected. Get additional information, search for those things, and see what the issues are. So it gives me a way of looking at everybody through the same lens. And it's something that you don't install. It's out there. We're gathering this data all the time, but now it gives you that perspective to say, you and others, adversary or allies, friend or foe, you can now look at yourself, a third party that's a trusted third party, part of your supply chain, a third party that's your competitor. So if you want to differentiate from your competitor, see how they're doing, how well they're doing, you can look at that analysis as well, or a threat actor, and that's through the CTI. So I can look at that same infrastructure and say, here's where the tooling is running. Many different threat actors are using that same tooling. It's like a SaaS provider of badness. I can look at all of that in the same sort of view and be able to take action immediately to say, block, or you need to fix, you need to have a mitigating control. We need to have a contingency because of the way that they're set up. It's a little bit different. And it's all public data. All the information that we have is something that a threat actor sees. So this is what they're doing as well. That's the same view of yourself and others to know where you stand and get the lay of the land.
So, or does that answer a lot of the questions? Is there anything else you want to highlight about this that we're getting question in the chat?
Yeah, there's been some questions about how we score differently from some of the other providers that score. It's hard to tell because we don't really know what their metrics are for using. But as you can see, some of these more higher profile CVEs are marked high. We have some, hygiene issues like expiring domains or expiring SSL certificates that are marked low. So what we're trying to do is kind of, instate a severity metric of, low, medium, high, where the highs are usually changing and relate to major events.
Yeah. So for example, right here, you can see that, hey, the CVSS score 2, it's a medium. CVSS score 3, it's a high, but we're saying it's a high. And the reason for that is that, hey, there's 4 exploits out there. And there's even, chatter on the Tor networks and others talking about this vulnerability. So it gives you the understanding of where to put your forces. It's looking at all the vulnerabilities. There's not enough resources and time to fix everything. So if you have to decide which ones are the priority to do first, these are the types of ones that you need to focus on. And that's why we try to make them an insight to say, hey, this is where you really need to look at these, but it could be any CVE. I just put that CVE in, I see it. If there's known exploits, you're going to see it. They're going to be listed. You can click and go directly to them. These are all things that we try to do to see how affects you and others. So for example, it's not in the RiskIQ attack surface, and it's not in any of the third parties that I'm dealing with. So I can look from that perspective, but from the insight, I might have additional ways of finding stuff. And the CVE, just from having that version installed, might not mean that I'm susceptible. But if we do the deeper check through the insight, and it says it's there, hey, they're susceptible because we're doing deeper intelligence behind it.
So Benjamin, I know we weren't able to log in today. We had some issues with that, which is a first for us, but can anyone just go in and get an Illuminate license and try some of this stuff out themselves?
Yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a link right now to get in. Let me throw this in the chat.
And then while you're doing that, the winner of our contest we announced earlier is, drum roll please, Cheryl H. So Cheryl will be in touch with you directly. Congrats, it's shopping season, so put that gift card to good use.
So I sent everybody this link. So this is a link to our community where I can get more information about Illuminate, the enterprise versions, the CTI, SecOps, which is just like the reputation score, and using that for high volume, like API type queries to be able to chuck everything real quick, and the third-party intelligence. But there's this Activate trial. And when I click on that, I can create an account using my work email and have a 30-day trial where I see my own organization. I look to see high, medium, and low issues. And then you can kick the tires. You can run these same queries, get the data. The Microsoft tab won't show up unless you integrate it into your Sentinel and Defender. So that tab will be missing. But if you do have Sentinel and Defender and you want to activate it, you can go into your account settings. And then in your account settings, there will be an integration section where you can add those in there. So we have one for CrowdStrike, we have one for Microsoft, and you can even turn on and off additional data coming in. So if you have a free account for hybrid analysis or virus total, open DNS, Alien Vault, you can turn these on and put the credentials in there. So when you search inside of our interface, we go out there and grab that corresponding data. So if you search for an IP domain, a hash, for example, we'll bring that data back and show it in the interface. So you can do it for all in one place.
And Barrett, any questions that we have? I know we're just at time. success@riskiq.com. Is that the best way for folks to get in touch with us after?
Yeah. That's the perfect address, and we'll get you connected to the right folks. So reach out anytime.
Any parting words, Josh?
Sorry, I was over here with engineering trying to figure out what was going on with the lab. We didn't make much progress. Not really certain why the authentication didn't work for so many people today. We are hunting down the answer there. Thank you all for being here. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with, well, actually we won't, because we're going to have the Thanksgiving holiday, and then we'll be
a year in review.
Yeah, for our year in review. You won't want to miss that. There's a lot of things that happened this year, just as last year was a really big year for cyber. And so again, just want to thank everyone for being here and for being as flexible as you were. This is a live event. And so things can happen in that context. And so we appreciate everyone's patience, and happy hunting out there to unmask and defeat adversaries.
And Tim, thank you so much for joining us today and relocating to be back online. That was amazing. So thank you.
Thanks for having me, and anytime.
Okay, thanks.
Right.